Style. The style of your songs will, to a large extent, dictate the types of placements your songs will work for. Write a song with an 80s grunge rock sound, and this type of song would work within the context of a TV show or film that's set in the 1980s or has a character that grew up in the 80s. As I've said, music is used to support the storyline of the scene in which the song is being used. In the same way that the lyrics support the plot, the style of the music is used to enhance the plot as well. If you pay attention to how music is used in TV and films, you'll notice that not just the lyrics, but also the style of music is used to support the story in which the music is being used in. For example, if a film is set in the 1960s, it will most likely use music either from this period or music that is reminiscent of music from this time period. Think of music as simply another supporting element of the story. Music placed in TV shows and films has to fit the overall context of the story it's being used to support. So, knowing this, what kind of styles should you write? Well, there isn't really a one-size-fits-all answer. Fortunately, there are lots of different projects with a wide range of stylistic needs. But with that said, if you're working in a style that's extremely dated or obscure, then by default, you'll be limiting the number of opportunities your music could work for. For example, if you specialize in folk music a la John Denver, then sure, your music would probably work for a few projects here and there, but it wouldn't be as in demand as something like modern rock or indie rock that is more contemporary and more in demand. It's a good idea to think about the types of scenes your music could work for when writing music with the goal of licensing it. Think about how the three elements, style, lyrics, and vibe, work together to dictate the types of scenes your music would work in. Again, you don't need to know exactly where your music will be used, as the majority of the time you won't know this when you're working on your tracks, but you can get a good idea of where your songs might fit by thinking about the three elements of your tracks. Let's take a song, for example, that is about falling out of love with a 70s vibe and that has a sad mood with a male vocalist. Something like this might work in a film set in the 70s about a down-and-out character who has just been abandoned by his lover and he's struggling to get over her. A song like this might also work in a film that has an older character who grew up in the 70s whose wife is leaving him. These are just a couple of possible scenarios, but the more you think about these elements and how they work in conjunction with each other, the easier it will become to write songs that work in the context of licensing. Let's outline another example. Let's say you have a track that sounds very modern, a la Katy Perry, Lady Gaga, Taylor Swift, and so on. It's a fun, upbeat pop track with female vocals about going out to party and have a good time. Something like this obviously wouldn't work in our previous example, but instead would work in a TV show or film with a young female millennial who is coming of age. A track like this might work in a scene where a young female character is going out to a club with her friends. When I first started writing tracks for licensing, I wouldn't think about these things at all. I would just write tracks and hope that my publisher and the supervisor she worked with would have a need for them. I would sometimes get lucky and just happen to write the right track for the right scene. After all, most of us are writing tracks that incorporate a lot of common themes into them. Things like relationships and overcoming adversity tend to make good themes for songs in the same way that they do for TV shows and movies. But once I started to take note of which songs of mine were being picked up and which ones weren't, I was able to better predict the types of tracks that would have more success. If you're passionate about writing authentic polka music, that's great, but don't be surprised if there aren't an abundance of opportunities to license this style of music. I don't think most writers necessarily need to completely revamp their approach to songwriting in order to get their music licensed, but it helps a lot to simply be aware of how the style of music you're writing, along with the lyrics and mood of your songs, will impact the likelihood of your songs being licensed. Start thinking about what types of scenes the songs you write would work in. If you're having a hard time imagining where your music would work, chances are the publishers, libraries, and supervisors you work with will as well. To get a better idea of what works and what doesn't, there are a few different things you can do. Start paying attention to music used in the background of TV shows and films. Notice how the style of the tracks being used fits within the context of the scene and the story it's being used in. The more aware you are of the role style plays within the context of licensing, the more you can write songs that will work within a broad range of scenarios.